Redditors who have hired a private investigator. What did you find out? Hadn't heard from my mom since I was about 15. Very unstable due to drugs and alcohol, etc. When I was 29, I decided it was time to find out what happened to her. I figured if she was Jane Doe somewhere, then I could put her to rest. And if she was alive, then I wanted to let her know that I forgave her. Hired a PI to help. I guess she was moved by my story, and so she also ran info for the man my mother was apparently married to on the house. And with one clue from his report, I was able to track them down. I wouldn't have found my mom alive and was just starting out on recovery after being homeless and addicted for many years. And if it wasn't for the PI who kindly ran an extra report for free. Mom has remained sober now for about 7 years and is probably the healthiest she has ever been physically and emotionally. My sister, mid-30s, is adopted and hired one to find her estranged biological father. They came back saying that not only was he still alive and nearby, but he had a daughter, meaning she also had a biological sibling. Further digging from the PI uncovered that they weren't just similar ages either, they were exactly the same age. The evidence suggested that my sister had a twin and her birth father had taken the twin and vanished. Huge, life-changing news. Eventually, through more incredible detective work, the PI realized that the daughter was actually just my sister. There was no other sibling, and they had just been investigating my sister and the whole time. Needless to say, we asked for the money back. TLDR. Sister hired a private investigator. Private investigator accidentally investigated sister. Wow. A waste of time. My grandmother's first boyfriend after my grandfather died said he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together and bought a new car. In her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a PI. Turns out that old sod had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend, not the PI. Not me, but my friend, also a lawyer like myself, was handling a contested will. Normally very straightforward. Anyway, woman in her mid-30s, husband just died. He was in his late 70s or early 80s, can't remember. Still nothing fishy because hey, nothing wrong with an adult transaction where a very good looking young woman sleeps with a rich old man in exchange for the use of his credit card. Here's where it gets slightly concerning. 2 months before his death, he rewrote his will and left everything to her instead of his 5 kids. Around 35 million in cash and assets. And then it gets downright thriller movie-ish. Turns out, the woman is a 5-time widow. Now you may be saying, sure, that could just be the unluckiest, most pitiful widow in the world. But it gets even fishier. In all, 5 of her marriages, the wills were rewritten just months before their deaths, and every cause of death was natural causes, despite not all of them being as old as the latest husband, and toxicology tests were not carried out during any of the 5 autopsies. But wait, there's more. It turns out that the widow was never home during any of the deaths, yet insisted the autopsies were carried out at the same institute. But wait, still more. Widow is also distantly related to one of the higher-ups at the institute. Well, what happened after? They're still contesting. A lot of cases got put on hold due to COVID. Massive backlogs in court. There's been a few added developments here and there, but there's been a lot of underhanded tactics by both sides in the meantime. Edit. Just remembered that a little more drama is happening. The lawyer who drafted both the old as well as the new will is being called as a witness. Depending on cross, there may be grounds for him losing his license. Not me, but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a PI to find his brother so they can be reunited. Sadly, with just a picture and the fact many people died in the war, it wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. My mother's dad walked out on mom, my aunt, and my grandmother when mom was just 5. A few years later, my grandmother died of grand mal Caesar. Mom was taken in by her grandparents, but she always wondered why her dad left and what became of him. In her 40s, she saved up a bit and hired a PI to track him down. Turns out he moved over time from Pittsburgh to California, where he wound up in prison for armed robbery and some other violent crimes. He died in San Quentin Penitentiary. I think mom got a lot of closure out of that. She was able to see that life would have most likely been even worse had he stayed. At least living with her grandparents, she was loved and raised to fulfill her potential. Wow. Had a babysitter we thought was stealing from us. Luckily, our neighbor was a PI couple and they ran a background check for $10. Babysitter had a string of DUIs and few days before a large fine was due. My camera disappeared. He also stole money from my kids' piggy banks. He sort of disappeared but was really into Instagram, so I surreptitiously followed him. He started babysitting again for a single mom, easy target, and posted a lot of fun pics with this family. I tracked down the mom and sent her a long email detailing out his whole scam. She said we were right and it was clear he'd been stealing from her business. He has since gone underground, but I still Google him regularly to see what he's been up to. He's been able to avoid arrests for a while now. Good thing he was gone before anything worse happened. So I learned a lot about con artists from this experience. He was not a child molester and was a genuinely nice and likable person. Very talented photographer and really good with kids. It was almost as if he thought he deserved what he stole because he had such a big heart. When I say he targeted single moms, he genuinely helped them as well by watching their kids and going the extra mile to be helpful. It was a very complex situation and I think that's common with these cases. People truly like the con artist and feel almost embarrassed to have been taken advantage of, so they often just go unreported. When I met my wife, she seemed to have a normal modern family. 2 moms, 2 dads. Over time it became apparent her stepdad wasn't around much. Holidays, birthdays, you name it. He'd pop in to say hi, grab a nap, whatever, then take off again. My wife's family thought this was normal, just the way it had always been since they were teenagers. He claimed to have a job following FedEx trucks around the state to prevent theft and drug trafficking. But I thought it was strange and started making jokes about him having another family. Well, I guess it got my sister-in-law thinking because she gets a favor from the PI at her law firm. Sure enough, he has not 2, but 3 wives around the states and 5 other stepchildren between them. My sister-in-law breaks the news to her mother, who immediately changes the locks and files for divorce. They never speak again. Cold turkey. Divorce is even uncontested. As a FU, they also send the report to his other wives. I used to work for an insurance defense firm years ago. Best PI story I have is where we hired one to tail a guy who was suing a client for an injury that wasn't entirely our client's fault. The guy was refusing to settle and was insisting on going to trial even though we offered a fair sum that would have paid his medical bills. The PI we hired got some good pics that showed the plaintiff was nowhere near as injured as he claimed. But the crown jewel of the photos was one where the guy was walking on a pier with a woman who wasn't his wife, had his hand on her bum and everything. Later in a deposition, the attorney slid the picture to the plaintiff and said something like, "Mr. Smith," obviously not his name, "who is the woman in this picture? We would like to schedule a deposition with her as well." The guy went ghost white and told his attorney he wanted to settle. At least he was smart enough to realize that if his wife found out the other woman was going to be deposed, he was going to have to get a family law attorney as well, because the divorce papers would soon follow. My wife and I are friends with a lot of bar owners and bartenders because of her job. We knew this one owner or tender, we will call him Dana. That was the nicest tucking guy. Like, if he knew you were sick, he would cover your shift at your bar, then give you the tips he made that night, Just the best guy. Then one night we are drinking with another bartender friend, Ben. Ben lets us know that Dana has brain cancer. He's been keeping it quiet, but Ben has been giving him money, upwards of $5,000 for treatment. My wife and I were about to give money to Ben to pass on. Then Dana's business partner got suspicious and hired a PI to follow Dana on a day he took off for medical reasons. Turns out, Dana spent the day drinking at another bar, no doctor visits. The business partner confronts Dana, who comes clean. He did not have cancer. He was just saying that to get money from his friends. Apparently, lots of bartenders had been giving him money. Dana is more or less run out of town. He moved to a different city, and I know he slowly paid Ben back, but it took a couple of years. I'm not sure what happened to him since.